Welcome to this presentation for ED 530 on this advanced classroom teaching methods. And today we're talking about Marvin Marshall and his fostering responsible behavior. Of course, this is dealing with responsible behavior within the students uh, and helping them to take responsibility and many things like that. Let's look at the outline here that we're going to go over for Marvin Marshall. Of course, this is something that we covered within the class when we were going through the book, and there's some helpful things and some interesting things that were covered as we looked at it. We'll start by looking at the background of Marvin Marshall. Who is this that we're talking about? What has he done? How is he? Why is he important? And then we'll look at his impact on education. As we look at who he is, we'll find out he is important in education, but he has some things that are beyond or outside of education. But just for this class, we're going to look and see how is he impacting education itself. And then we'll look at the application of the work of Marvin Marshall. How does it apply to us? How does it apply to specifically, of course, Christian educators, but educators in general, and then Christian educators beyond that. And so we'll look at those three things. As we start by looking at his background, he went to school in at the California State University. It's where he attended with his undergrad, and this is the one in Los Angeles. This isn't UCLA. This isn't the University of California in Los Angeles, but it's California State University, Los Angeles. And he had the opportunity to teach from that. He graduated with his undergrad in a bachelor's of language arts. He went on to do a master's in business administration from the same place. And then he did go to USC, the University of Southern California, and he completed a doctorate of education. And I do find that a little interesting. He has a little bit of a varied educational degree there. And, he didn't necessarily start in education. Of course, we do see finished in education. But he had a variety of things. Sometimes that can be very helpful if you are studying other things and you can bring that into the classroom. Sometimes that's very helpful for people, especially if they have a natural ability to teach and things like that. He taught for several years and taught at different levels, different places, both in the inner cities or, a large city, and then also in suburbs. And he also had a variety of responsibilities within schools. Did a little bit with athletics and counseling, guidance, as well as teaching, supervision. We eventually even got to become principals and work at the district level. And so a wide variety of responsibilities, and he seemed to have done several things there. Out of that, he became a lecturer, and for several years lectured across the United States and even internationally. He had the opportunity to lecture about what it was he taught, and he came up with certain ideas and certain emphasis that he taught. And he comes to speak, and he kind of has an emphasis that he talks about, and it's really the phrase "without stress," and it's an approach that he gives for education, but he also gives it for just a daily living, living your life without stress. He has an approach of without stress for parenting. How are you parenting? And he applies this without stress philosophy to parenting. and also to disciplining, and that would definitely have an impact. Specifically, the disciplining part would be with education, a connection there, and he had an opportunity and wrote several books about some of his ideas. Of course, those are cited and spoken of in the textbook that we read, and so that's who Marvin Marshall is, and just a little bit of a background and um, some of the important things we need to know as we start looking at his theory and his ideas about responsible behavior, and especially connected to education. And so, let's look at his impact on education. We talked about um, his without stress idea, and he talks about classroom management versus discipline. And he kind of says that classroom management is the responsibility of the teacher. You should have things organized, you should have things planned, and that is the responsibility of the teacher. And the discipline is the responsibility of the student. The student should their behavior should be correct, but the teacher should have procedures in place so that the students know what they're supposed to do. When they are doing things, when they're practicing, when they're in class, he gives three different principles that he likes to say, and one of them is positivity. He doesn't want anything negative. You should always be positive. When you speak, you shouldn't be negative. He encourages teachers. He encourages people to give choice. People will always have more interest in what they choose to do. They won't argue against something if they make the choice to do it. And so he likes to give them a choice, and he likes to have them reflect. That was his third principle there of reflection. They should be able to look back on what it is that they did, what it is they've learned, what it is they want. So they should be able to reflect, and this should all bring about responsibility. And responsibility allows things to be guided. It allows for understanding, and allows for different levels of development. It allows the student to develop further on, and things with that. And so some of his other important areas, things that he emphasized, was he emphasized clear expectations. He wanted the students to know what exactly was expected of them. When you have a project, what exactly are you expecting the student to do? Do they know what the expectations are for them for behavior? This allows a student to be able to clearly understand and clearly have a goal of what they are to accomplish. He really worked at engaging with the student. The student should know, of course, that the teacher likes the material, but the engagement there should help the student desire to learn more about it. What is it that brings curiosity? What is it that causes the student to want to know more, wants to know the next step? So the ways that something is taught should cause the student to desire to know more about it. Of course, we talked a little bit already about the reflection. We talked about the student reflecting on what it is, but the influence that a teacher can have. He thought that teachers should have influence, and a lot of that went back to the positive approaches and promoting students' desire. A teacher was supposed to be likable, and should be working to increase their ability to be likable. And so Marvin Marshall had these ideas about education, about what he expected and what he wanted from teachers. And so Let's look at the application, and we're going to look at this application of the work of Marvin Marshall, really in a twofold aspect. First, the academic application, and then the biblical context. And of course, the biblical context is the most important, and I've saved that for last for emphasis. We want to kind of emphasize a few things as we look at what it is. Of course, academically, one of the most important things I've come away with from this is making sure you have clear expectations. I thought that was something that was very important, to make sure that as you teach, as you give assignments, as you give your goals, your objectives, you're very clear with what it is that you want, what it is you're desiring. Do the students understand that? That's a very, very important thing. And then also, like I mentioned before, about the engagement and the curiosity that's developed. You may not necessarily be able to get it out of every student, but you do want them to be curious about what it is you're trying to. How do I accomplish this? How do I understand this? What is it that's being taught? Um, maybe in history, for instance, curiosity about what is that happened in math. How do I solve this problem? And so building that curiosity and really working to get the student to desire to learn more, desire to make it to the next step, desire. And so both clear expectations and working on helping the student to have that desire and that curiosity to help them learn. And so we have these academic applications here. So we also have this biblical context. Now, some of the things that he talked about, some of the things he emphasized, have biblical connections. Some things that we have to look at. Of course, we look at things through the view of the Bible. We have a biblical worldview, and so we view everything. How does this apply? How does this connect? What do we believe about this through the Bible? And in the Bible, of course, there's the example of those in Berea. The Bible says that those in Berea were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they heard the word and they searched to see if those things were so. And so we don't just hear things and just take it at its face value, but we seek to find out, does this agree with the Bible? Does this agree with a biblical principle? And one of the things that really jumped out to me was positivity. Now, we want to be positive. We don't want to always be negative and necessarily a Debbie Downer per se. But when it comes to giving directions, for instance, Marvin Marshall always thought, we should be positive and not necessarily put things in a negative way. But when God gave His instructions, when God gave His laws and His rules, He gave them in a way that were negative. Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not covet. Thou shalt not bear false witness. So always being positive, there's some good to that, but I don't think we can go too far with that in a way that's not necessarily biblical. God is very clear. He gives clear expectations when it comes to things, and sometimes He does it in a negative way. Marvin Marshall talked about responsibility, and some of his mindset was that you were to build responsibility in a student, and as they're responsible, they will become obedient. In fact, I believe this is really the opposite of what it is that the Bible teaches. The Bible teaches us to obey our parents. I have children, and they're not going to be responsible and then obey. No, they need to be taught that they need to obey, and then out of that they will grow and they will learn responsibility. And Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 17, the Bible says,